Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, the young casualties of the Syrian conflict. Child deaths increased by 50% in 2017. That's according to a UNICEF report published this month. Deep in the Yemen conflict, France 24's Cyril Payen joins us on the programme with his account of what's been dubbed the Forgotten War. Also coming up, in Egypt, the election campaign kicks off with no real challenges to the incumbent leader Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We take a look at the sparsely attended rally of the only other candidate. But first, to Syria, where an entire generation of children are traumatised following 7 years of bombardment, starvation and neglect. That's according to a report published by UNICEF, which also claims that more children were killed in 2017 than ever before. Officials at the UN body have warned that this year numbers could be even worse.
أصعب شيء عندما نرى الأطفال إيش ذنبه يعني ما هو ذنبه.
No one is safe from the war in Syria, not even children. While many are injured and mentally scarred, others have been killed, almost 20,000 since 2011. In eastern Ghouta, close to 200 children have been killed since February alone, according to UNICEF.
It becomes obvious that the sacred principle of protection of children under all circumstances that once was universally embraced, at no moment none of the parties have ever respected.
In 2017, the number of children killed doubled, and UNICEF is pessimistic about 2018. Most survivors suffer physically and psychologically.
Children have lost limbs. Children are paralyzed for life. And let us be very clear, that sad reality continues still every single day.
These images were filmed by a resident of eastern Ghouta. Entire families are barely surviving in makeshift shelters in inhumane conditions. These children are trying to treat their wounded parents any way they can. Most of them are very young and have only known war.
Let's move on to another conflict in the region which has left the country ravaged by constant violence, famine and disease. And that's Yemen, one of the most impoverished nations in the Middle East. Now, one of our own journalists, Cyril Payen, who joins us on the show today, went to Aden earlier this month to report from the port city where different forces are battling each other on the ground. We'll speak to Cyril just after this report.
On a mission with government forces in the streets of Aden.
Get out of the way.
These men are the last remaining regular soldiers in the city after violent combat pitted them against opposition rebels 4 weeks ago. The men of the renowned 39th Brigade prepare for an anti-terror operation, a show of force, or perhaps a shot at glory.
We're erecting barricades in this area. We've received information that a vehicle rigged with explosives entered Aden this morning.
Worn out and reduced to just a few hundred men entrenched in one area of the city. The military doesn't control much here. But the army chiefs want to put on a brave face and show off their newest recruits.
You should respect your motherland, this sacred soil you're treading on. Never forget that this country feeds you. I also command that you treat your comrades like your brothers.
The wage guaranteed is often the sole motivation for these Yemenis ruined by the war, even if some have managed to hold on to their patriotic streak.
Everybody knows that we have many enemies surrounding our country and inside.
These men are all determined. They're here to fight on the front lines. We train them and we make them into real soldiers. They're very motivated. By the way, all those men here, they came with their own weapons.
But the colonel's optimism looks like the final hurrah of an army in disarray.
The reporter behind that story, Cyril Payen, joins us here on set. Thank you very much for coming in. Cyril, getting access to Yemen is challenging, to say the least. How did you guys manage to get in?
Well, there's been long time, month of working with the Yemenite embassy in different countries in Europe just to get this access. The thing is that when we went in, we had the green light. It was very surprising because it was just a few weeks after a huge offensive launched by the southern rebels on Aden. So when we landed actually in Aden, it was a besieged town which was controlled partially, very marginally by the government, which is the government recognized by the international community, and a few hundreds of soldiers we can see here. We're talking about 2 or 3 battalions remaining in town. But the actual power, the people who are multiplying checkpoints and blockades and asking papers and things to everyone, including us, are the southern rebels who are controlling southern Yemen and now Aden. So it was a very chaotic, very volatile situation, and it meant for us that the conditions of working were extremely difficult and harsh, but reflecting the difficulties of daily life for the population of Aden, of course.
So you're talking about all the intricacies in terms of the different players that are at war here. And of course, this conflict has been going on for over 3 years, and there's still no end in sight, despite the deteriorating conditions.
No, and as soon as you step in Aden, it's extremely clear that the 3 years of war have been extremely traumatizing for the people, but also the town has all the syndromes of the stigmas, I will say, as a gun hole in every buildings, you know, the infrastructure, administration, hotels. It has been a very touristic place back to a few years ago, are totally destroyed by bombardments, by attacks. So you have again this huge sentiment of chaotic situation, and the problem is you have this variety of powers, a superposition of powers trying to get control of Yemen, but also taking profit of the chaos is the jihadist threat with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which is really making it a point to be heard in the chaos. So you have nearly every day some attacks from both sides. So it's quite scary. And to answer your question, we don't see any end in short or middle term to anything of this conflict.
You've just been describing the damaged infrastructure because of the bombardment. But in addition to that, you were witnessing things like starvation, the cholera outbreak, of course, which is supposed to be one of the worst experienced in modern history.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, just to talk about this besieged town of Aden, which is the second largest town in Yemen, you have to understand that half of the population lives now under the poverty line. You can see hundreds of people begging in the streets, and these people are IDPs, internal refugees coming from another part of the conflict, which is the conflict between the south and the north, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's a regional conflict. So again, out of this 10,000 victims out of these 3 years of war, we know that maybe 2/3 of them are civilians, and lots of people are unaccounted for. So these statistics are very opaque as long as we talk. But there are lots of casualties, and it will again last for long term. And we know that there are 2 or 3 generations already lost in Yemen.
Cyril Payen, thank you for giving us that exclusive insight into the ongoing conflict in Yemen. Turning our attention to Egypt, where one of the staunchest supporters of the incumbent President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced he's running in the upcoming election. Moussa Mostafa Moussa hasn't even given any speeches or really campaigned to win over voters. In fact, his first election rally was attended by no more than 25 supporters. So few expect a heated contest as the two men face off on March 26th.
A show for the cameras. At this rally, there are more journalists than supporters. Today, their candidate is playing his role in this presidential campaign, one of a liberal centrist, the only opposition in the running.
We don't want the current climate or a referendum. We want a real democratic election. We're in this election to win.
Despite his rhetoric, Moussa Mostafa Moussa was supporting his rival just weeks ago. He has refused to make speeches, create television or newspaper ads, or even criticize President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. His supporters follow his lead.
It doesn't matter who wins. What matters is for Egypt to win and keep shining. Mr. Moussa and President Sisi have the same goal, the well-being of this country.
Sisi is expected to win the race outright after the first round vote from the 26th to the 28th of March. Moussa Mostafa Moussa is the only one standing to keep Sisi from obtaining 97% of votes like he did 4 years ago. Most opposition leaders have called to boycott the election.
We won't allow ourselves to participate in this farce. We're boycotting the elections entirely, and we're calling for the Egyptian people to join us.
Others were prevented from running altogether. Ahmed Shafiq, former prime minister under Hosni Mubarak, was detained in the United Arab Emirates until he dropped out of the race. Sami Anan, formerly chief of staff, was arrested after declaring his candidacy. A former Islamist with ties to the now-banned Muslim Brotherhood, Abdel Abdel Fattah, was imprisoned even after he gave up his bid. The press has also been held back. Abroad and at home, President Sisi has positioned himself as the only one who can rule the country as it struggles to rebound economically from the 2011 revolution and faces attacks from Islamist groups, notably in the Sinai.
In the name of God, the price of Egypt's stability and security is my life. I won't allow anyone to interfere with Egypt's security.
It's an argument that sits well with the army in power. Sisi hopes it'll also convince voters to cast their ballots in his favor. So far, Egypt's allies abroad have refrained from objecting. They continue to support Sisi as an important ally in the fight against terrorism, even as human rights abuses go unacknowledged.
Let's finish on a musical note and leave you with some images of Israel's entry for the 2018 Eurovision Song Contest. The song Toy by Netta Barzilai has become the bookies' favourite to win, and it's everything a Eurovision number should be. It's poppy, it's catchy, and it's got plenty of colour. Thank you for watching.
I'm not your